One of the most common type of virtualization which we encounter or know about is referred as server virtualization, which I just explained. So in that case, we take physical server and on top of it, we run virtual server and ensure that they are isolated and they do not create problem for each other. So that is the type of virtualization which is most commonly used or made virtualization that popular is server virtualization. But we didn't stop there and we figured out how we can perform these type of decoupling for other solutions also, like it could be desktop virtualization. So instead of having physical desktop tied to an operating system, can we stream a image of a operating system onto a desktop, and whatever the hardware is, it does not matter, we can still have the same experience or software of my application. So that is what a desktop virtualization. Then is application virtualization. Can I package my application in such a way that it becomes isolated? So instead of installing application every time, application gets just connected to my operating system. I launch it and it is being streamed to me or given to me from a central server rather than being installed on my own physical server or virtual server. So that is application virtualization. Same type of approach came in storage also. So we started virtualizing storage also. Why don't we create a bunch of disks, connect them together, and then on top of it through software, we create software storage, and that is called storage virtualization. Another common one is network virtualization, which is very commonly used in cloud. We cannot create physical isolation for every resource we launch, so we can create virtual network and still keep them separate if the need be. So these are the most common one which you will find into AWS cloud also. Now we will discuss them, but just to give you an idea that some example if you want to derive to that what could be used. So if you have used Amazon EC2, that is a type of a server virtualization, right? Desktop virtualization, yes, we may have used something called Amazon Workspace, that is a type of desktop virtualization. Application virtualization, you could have used all these applications which are packaged and then delivered directly to you. So in Workspace also you could have your way of application virtualization. Storage virtualization, when you are deploying a EBS, Elastic Block Store, or when you are connecting to a EFS volume, that is a type of storage virtualization. Network virtualization, when you are creating your VPCs, when you are creating your subnet, that is a type of storage virtualization, sorry, network virtualization we are using. So these are very common one, EC2s, EBS volume, VPCs. This is the type of virtualization which is required in cloud to ensure isolation. What happens behind the scene? Let's talk about that. Behind the scene of all this virtualization is a program that is what we refer as hypervisor. So hypervisor is a program that allows multiple operating systems to share a single hardware host. We are using a word here that we referred as called host. Another word we refer is called guest. So like in real life, a host is where guests come in, or a host would accommodate multiple guests. Same thing here. You could see there is a hardware, and on top of it, rather than having a traditional operating system, we have installed a hypervisor, and on top of it, we are running virtual machine. So hypervisor is a type of operating system, very fine-tuned, and now this hypervisor has control of all the memory and resources. However, hypervisor is actually controlling the host resources. This is also referred as virtualization layer or virtual machine manager. The name could be different, but idea is we have a software who is now controlling the hardware, and on top of it, we are running our traditional operating system. Now, within this hypervisor, you may have called type 2 and type 1 type of hypervisor. So sometime you may refer somebody say, hey, we are using a type 2 hypervisor. Then you may have something called type 1 hypervisor. So let's go ahead and talk about that. And this one is also referred as host based hypervisor, and this one is referred as a bare metal hypervisor. We'll discuss that in a minute. Now, what is the host-based hypervisor? What we do in this case, a host-based virtualization system requires an operating system such as Windows or Linux to be installed on the computer. It runs an application on the host operating system. So we have our hardware. On top of it, we install a traditional operating system, Windows, Linux, or Mac, and on top of it, we install virtualization software. Now, What it could be, if I'm talking about a company called VMware, they have a product called VMware Workstation. So maybe for testing training purposes, if you want to run something, you could have used VMware Workstation software on top of your Windows machine, and that allows you to further create a virtual machine which can have its own operating system. Maybe here I'm using Linux operating system, but here I may want to have a Windows operating system, so should not be a problem, and vice versa. And once it is ready, I could install my applications on top, and similarly I could launch more virtual machines on top of this virtualization software running on my Windows or Linux operating system. But this can be a good approach for testing training purposes. It may not be a production ready environment to run enterprise application, because if you look here, that we are still requiring here maintenance to be done on operating system. Any patches, any updates required, that can create problem for all the machines I am running. Plus we have our instruction first coming from this operating system to this layer, that layer transfer it's here, that then transfer here. So there is a little delay in terms of performance which may happen, and this virtualization software is being treated by this host operating system as like any other application. So it may not get all the privileges to access the hardware at full potential. So this is not something which we have used into production environment. Now what we do instead of that, we use guest operating system which may directly be able to talk to my hardware. How means not directly, but in the sense that we are using this guest operating system without having this host operating system. So virtualization software becomes my operating system, that we refer as type 1 hypervisor, or we refer it bare metal, means this is metal, my hardware, and on top of it I am running my virtualization software. You could clearly see there is no operating system, so my request can be fulfilled much faster, and this virtualization layer or software is much efficient in managing this multiple VM. It knows how to parallelly process the request, how to isolate resources, how to give priority or not give priority. All these things can be done by this virtualization operating system. So the hypervisor is the operating system. If you heard about what are the commercial products available for this type of type 1 hypervisor, VMware is a prominent name, Microsoft is one of them, Citrix is there, Oracle, Parallel, Red Hat, and a lot of open source projects are there also, like Zen, that can be utilized by companies to run their products. Right. So Zen is open source, and initially AWS has used it, but later what AWS has done, AWS has come up with their own hypervisor. So AWS runs EC2 machine, that is what we connect to, and these EC2 instances, as we call them, these EC2 instances run on top of some hardware, and there should be some software to manage it. So AWS has combined these two and started creating something called a own solution, which is called AWS Nitro. So Nitro is the hardware software combination which is purpose built for running Amazon EC2 instances. So high chances that if you launch an Amazon instance right now, it would be launched on a Nitro hardware software combination. You do not directly integrate or connect to these systems. You just launch it. Behind the scene, they would take care of all the hardware software configuration, whatever you have required. So I hope this thing is clear. You know a little bit more about what virtualization is. It is one of the building blocks of cloud. Another building block for cloud is automation. So once you have done virtualization at scale and automation at scale, that is basically where we go into the cloud environment. Let's talk about other networking component into the next section. Thank you.